All right, so welcome back. I'm Diggins E71. My name is Dylan. So we are out in the shop tonight and we are fixing the truck after an absolutely epic cash stage that we went to. So if you watched the last videos, we were on our way to this all-wheel drive race. We fixed a bunch of stuff with the truck. We were happy just to be there. We ended up getting there and they canceled our class. We were gonna race, blah, 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 blah. Jumped up there with some of the baddest no prep and street racers in the country, because it's what we do. We go to race. We didn't go there to spectate. So we were there, we were racing, and I swung for it and I missed. But at some point during the run, I broke the intake on the truck. So I have a Trailblazer SS intake on this truck and I broke it pretty good. Let's go take a look. So there's a lot of people out there that believe in this myth that the plastic style intakes that come factory on LSs are bad. Oh, they're gonna crack over 20 pounds. They're gonna do this, they're gonna do that, yada, yada, yada. Well, that's just flat out not true. So plastic intakes, whether they're stock truck intakes, whether they're LS1, 2, 6, you name it, intakes, Trailblazer intakes, whatever, they're all good for a lot more boost than your head gaskets and rods are. So don't worry about that. So just because I broke my intake doesn't mean I broke it because of boost pressure. Now, running more boost than I wanted did cause the part of the intake to fail, but that's not because it was just too much boost. It's because I had modified the intake, and when I had modified, that's what failed. So this is a Trailblazer SS intake, and normally this is just a completely sealed piece of plastic. The 04 and newer truck intakes are also the same way. This is like a embossed area where EGR or something would go. These intakes are sealed, they don't have that. But at one point in time, if you see, I know I don't have a very good light, but if you see, there's a hole in there that I had put a IAT sensor, an intake air temperature sensor. Well, that didn't last very long. I realized how bad of an idea that was and it sucked. So I pulled it out and I bought a EGR block-off plate from ICT Billet. So that's just a billet plate that goes in here, and I drilled and tapped this area for a bolt to go through. So I had this JB welded for good insurance and a bolt in there. Never thought it would be a problem. But that's where too much boost comes in and broke the intake. So sometime during my pass, we saw somewhere around 40 pounds of boost. Now, how do I know that? Well, the map sensor on this truck is a 3-bar map and it only reads up to 30 pounds. Well, we had that pegged basically as soon as I let go of the trains brake. It was just about there. The boost curve was vertical on the trains brake. It was skyrocketing. So we were on our way to well past 30 pounds when I let go of the button. But it's because my fuel regulator is 1-to-1. So every pound of boost increases fuel pressure by about 1 pound as well. So where my map sensor stopped at was right around 30 pounds, and my fuel pressure picked up another 13 after that. So that tells me I picked up somewhere around another 12, 13, 14 pounds of boost in there. So we had just about 40 pounds crammed through this thing. So now you're saying, oh, 40 pounds, how is it still alive, yada, yada, yada. Well, 40 pounds doesn't necessarily mean a bunch of horsepower. It mostly means a bunch of hot air. So I'm sure that this turbo was way maxed out, way past its efficiency. It was not doing any good to be at 30 pounds, much less 40. But anyway, 40 pounds pushed that billet block-off plate out and is gone. I don't know where it's at. I didn't know what to do. All I know is that it scared the crap out of me when I'm coming off my pass and I lift and the motor's still free revving. And so I'm still in gear and I'm off the throttle and it's still just revving to the moon like I'm still making a pull. So a lot of things had to happen real quick, but I'm over there trying to downshift and now it's revving even higher. Oh man, it was a mess. But I got her slowed down, I got it stopped, I turned the key off, coasted around the corner, and there we were. So I had to get out and inspect it, and I didn't notice where the crack was at first. I'm looking for a big chunk missing out of the thing. I never expected that a bolted in and JB welded in plug would get shot out into the stratosphere. So we ejectocito, cuz we ejected the block off plate and it caused this thing to free rev on me a little bit. But long story short, I need something else. Now I don't know what I'm going to replace it with. I have several stock truck intakes out in the shed. I got a couple of more on 2 engines over there, but I could repair that one too. There's no big deal. It's not a massive hole. I'm sure I could plug it with something, put a freeze plug in there, whatever. That's not a big deal. But I'm sort of in the attitude with this thing that I want to replace it and not repair. So I want to improve it. Now, a Trailblazer SS intake, for most of you watching, is going to be a fantastic intake. It's going to work phenomenally for the types of RPM that most of us see. And even in my case, that's really what I should be sticking with. But I have bigger goals than that. I want the thing to grow. And if I'm going to buy a new intake for this thing, or I'm going to replace it, if I'm going to pull it off, I want to put something on there that's going to grow with me. So with that in mind, I've looked at a couple of things, and it just makes sense a little bit to go with the Holley. The Holley high ram, I think, is what my move is going to be. So there's a couple of reasons for that. First is that it just looks really good. That's a good looking intake. You can get it polished, powdered, the accessories they sell with it, they all look good. So that's one thing. So aesthetic is something that I want to start improving on with this truck. I've got the function more or less headed in the right direction of where I want it to be. So if I can improve it, or if I can match the function that it has now and improve the aesthetic, I want to do that. So that's one reason. The second is that the high ram has long runners. Well, the long runners are more conducive to stuff that needs low torque like this thing. But every time I race this thing, I find a few more RPM and a little bit better ET. So if I'm going to start spinning the thing higher, I would like to have an intake that's going to be happy up there, as well as I really think that the Trailblazer up in the mid 7,000s really isn't going to be happy. So in this, for example, we spun the motor to like 74 and some change whenever I was racing the S10. So basically I'm to the point where I need to pull this thing off and I need to replace it with something. So I'm looking at a couple of things, and the Holley is what I want. So I've talked about stuff like this in the past, but when you build something, when you set it all up, you should make it so that way it's easy to work on. So what does that mean? It means putting fuel fittings right here where you can reach them. Now, I hate myself for doing red and blue and black. I hate that, but that's part of the things I'm going to improve. So those lines need to be swapped out for black. The fittings need to be swapped for black to match the rest of the stuff. So that's something that just has to happen, but it hasn't been a super priority, but now is a perfectly good time to do it. Same thing over here. You need to put fittings where they're easy to reach. It can save you a lot of time, headache, effort, everything. Like it's more motivating to go work on something when you know it's easy to work on. If you know something's going to be a pain in the ass, you're going to talk yourself out of it. So I really had no reason to pull this intake. Like I said, we could fix it. We could put a freeze plug in there. We could do whatever and fill that hole up and go racing. But since I know that it's easy to work on, it's only going to take me a few minutes to snatch this thing out. That's what I'm going to do. It's literally going to take me longer to make this video than it is to pull this intake off. So anyway, I'm going to quit procrastinating and get on it. Just that easy. All right, so intake is out of there. We got the bread box, the TBSS, the NNBS, whatever your flavor naming is, got it out of there. So we just got the valley cover left, and when I first took this thing off, there was a little bit of oil around there, just looked like it had a slight mist in there. So instead, I'm gonna pull it apart and put a new gasket in. So I think that the gasket under here is probably in good shape, but while I had everything apart, it's just another one of those examples of doing, taking care of stuff when you have an opportunity to do it versus putting it off. So like regular maintenance and all that stuff is very important. And it's like having an oil leak, or even if it's a small one like this one was, there was just a little bit of mist on here. I've already wiped it up, but you can tell like on that bolt head, there's just a little puddle of it, nothing crazy at all. It's just a perfect example of how to make your race car, your race truck, your street truck, your project stuff, something better. It's the perfect example of making them better without like really spending that much time, money, and effort. So like I already have the intake off. I noticed that there's a slight problem. It's not a big problem. It's something that probably would have been perfectly fine for the existence of the vehicle. But instead, just do it the right way. When you have time, do it the right way while everything is apart, and put a new gasket in it. It's just that easy. funny. It's a good thing I pulled this thing off. I found another piece of a valve spring down in there. It was in that corner back there. Little piece of a valve spring stuck in there. So I didn't even think about one of these still being inside the valley here. But sure enough, there was. And that could have easily fallen down on top of a cam lobe, either back there or up here where the lifter rides. And that could have, like I said, easily damaged something. So I'm glad I found this. Couldn't do a little more cleaning looking around. So the whole gasket edge looks pretty good. But definitely glad that I found more accidents. This is something definitely that was 100% my fault the first time around. So if it's my fault that I find it, I'm glad. So that's why you take things apart and take a look. Got the valley cover taken care of, got the gasket replaced, moved some wiring around, got the vacuum lines kind of cleaned up while we had some room, pretty much put my hand on a few things, made sure everything was good to go, so that way whenever I decide to replace this Trailblazer intake with whatever I ultimately put on it, we'll be ready to go for that. So stay tuned for the next episode to see what we replace it with. My name is Diggins E71. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time.